A woman floats out of her 12th floor Manhattan apartment window, bathed in a beam of blue light, and disappears into the night sky. 23 people claim to have witnessed it, including, allegedly, a UN Secretary General. Decades later, the story resurfaces in a Netflix documentary, reigniting controversy and leading to a lawsuit. This is the tale of Linda Napolitano, the most famous alien abduction case you've never heard of. Is it true? We're gonna get into it. Welcome to another episode of Mostly True Alien Stories.
They're coming.
UFO sightings. Many Americans have wondered about the dangers of unknown objects.
In Mexico, pulling back the curtain. We need to save ourselves.
Welcome back to Mostly True Alien Stories, the podcast where we lay out real reported alien encounters exactly as they were documented, and then we try to figure it out if they are mostly true or mostly just a well-told story. I'm Neal Girandola, and here with me, as usual, is my co-host, Andrew Triana. What's up, brother?
How are you, Neal?
I'm great. I'm excited about today because we're revisiting a story we did at the beginning of this podcast, but didn't believe there was really any truth to it, so it never aired. And more revelations have surfaced since producing this show, including more witnesses. And it takes place in 1989 in Manhattan, an abduction case so dramatic it sounds scripted. A woman reportedly floats out of her 12th floor apartment in lower Manhattan into a hovering craft, witnessed by over 20 people, including, allegedly, a high-ranking UN official. Now, the case blew up in UFO circles. It became the subject of a best-selling book, and more recently, a Netflix docuseries that stirred up enough controversy to result in a lawsuit. It's one of the most debated abduction accounts ever recorded, and chances are you've never heard of it. So here's how this works. I'll walk us through the case exactly as it was reported. Then Andrew and I are going to break it down. We're going to weigh in and figure out where we land on the truth scale, whether it's mostly true or not. And of course, we want you guys to weigh in as well. So drop any of your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Andrew, are you ready to get into this story?
I am ready to hover over Manhattan.
Ooh, I love that wordplay. Wordplay is great. All right. This is November 30th, 1989. It's lower Manhattan, New York City. And our primary witness in this story, in this encounter, this true report of an encounter, is Linda Napolitano. So in the early hours of November 30th of 1989, Linda Napolitano, a 41-year-old housewife and mother of two, claimed she was abducted by extraterrestrial beings from her apartment near the Brooklyn Bridge. She described being levitated through her closed window by a blue beam of light into a reddish-orange spacecraft where she underwent medical examinations by gray bipedal entities. What set the case apart was the number of alleged witnesses. UFO researcher Budd Hopkins, who investigated Napolitano's claims, reported that 23 individuals corroborated seeing a woman being taken aboard a UFO that night. Among these witnesses were two men, identified only as Richard and Dan, who claimed to be security agents escorting a high-ranking political figure, later speculated to be UN Secretary General Javier Perez de Cuellar. However, Perez de Cuellar publicly denied any involvement or knowledge of the incident. So Napolitano also presented an X-ray showing a small metallic object in her nasal cavity, which she believed was an alien implant. When she later agreed to have it removed surgically, the object was reportedly no longer present. In 1997, Hopkins witnessed the true story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions, detailing Napolitano's experience and the supporting testimonies. The case then gained significant media attention and became one of the most discussed abduction stories in ufology circles. Now we fast forward to October of 2024. Netflix released a 3-part docuseries. It was titled The Manhattan Alien Abduction, and that re-examined Napolitano's claims. The series featured interviews with Napolitano, her son, and Carol Rainey, Hopkins' ex-wife and a vocal skeptic of the case. Rainey questioned the authenticity of the hypnosis sessions conducted by Hopkins and suggested that some of the evidence, including letters from Richard and Dan, may have been fabricated. Feeling misrepresented, Napolitano filed a lawsuit against Netflix, alleging defamation and breach of agreement. She claimed that the documentary portrayed her as a liar and that she was misled about the extent of Rainey's involvement in the series. Despite the legal action, the docuseries aired as scheduled, sparking renewed debate over the veracity of Napolitano's story. And that's why we are revisiting this as well, because there's been a lot that's come from this since that docuseries came out. And Napolitano has not backed down at all from her
No.
story. All right. So
She's not. She's saying that they're all lying and she's telling the truth.
yeah, which is what makes this story so compelling now. At the time when we did this, I think we were both in agreement that this was, I don't even want to air this story. You know, it was
Right.
just sort of
Right.
almost just a blatant made up lie.
Right.
But now that this has some compelling elements to it, and I'm going to hand it off to you. Have you start weigh in, and I know there's some details probably that because I just read a report, so I read a report that doesn't have all the details. So I'm going to hand it to you. Let's see what we can dig up.
All right. So one of the other people featured in the Netflix docu-series was Peter Robbins. And Peter Robbins was actually Budd Hopkins' assistant. Like, he did everything with Budd Hopkins. So Budd was like the ufologist to go to for anything. I mean, he saw so many cases for people.
And he's no longer alive, right? So that's why
he passed. Yeah, he passed in 2011 of cancer.
And that's why his wife was part of this whole interview process, and that she's kind of the one who's leading the way of saying this is a lie.
Yeah, Carol, just to give you a little bit of history, she was a filmmaker, and she actually videoed all of the sessions that he would have with all these other people that had claimed to have been abducted.
She's in the room filming them.
Yeah, she's in the room filming them, and then she met Linda. She liked Linda, but one thing that I found really fascinating that she said, she was like,
I mean, what's not to like about Linda? You know what I mean? She's
like, your typical, housewife.
Right. She was floated out of her apartment into an alien spaceship. There's nothing not to like.
Right. And Carol said that she felt like Linda was born to do this, is how she described it. Yeah.
So meaning like, but that's more like saying she's a showman.
Yeah. She said that she took naturally to the camera. She took naturally to the crowd. She loved all the attention.
Like you and me. We take to the camera.
We take to the camera, right? Sometimes people don't want to see us on camera, but we do take to the camera.
Yeah, this is interesting. I didn't know this. That's what she said about her. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It was.
She's really knocking her credibility down by saying something like that.
And she's knocking her ex-husband's credibility as well.
Right.
I mean, this docuseries, if you watch it, I mean, it really punches Budd Hopkins in the face like several times. It's really kind of sad, but I don't know if it was a bitter divorce. I don't know any of that. I couldn't find really anything on that.
Do you know if Carol had anything to do with the production of the Netflix series?
I don't think she was. She was only supposed to be in one episode, and she ended up being in all 3 episodes. Now, that could have been by editing.
Right. Well, she sounds like she's the controversial element to the whole docuseries.
Oh, she is. Yeah. She is. And what was wild was what they did was they videoed Carol, talking about Linda, and then they showed Linda that footage of what she said. So if you get a chance to watch the docuseries, it's pretty wild because the reactions that they both have towards each other, there's a lot of animosity there. There's not a lot to like from either side.
So probably friendly at first, and then I wonder when that fell apart.
Yeah. Well,
after it started, Budd died?
No. It fell apart before that. What happened was the more that Carol videoed Linda, the more she started feeling like this is all just made up bullshit.
Well, she didn't have any bedroom talk with Budd to say, hey, what do you think about this? Because Budd stood by it to the end, right?
Well, he was obsessed with it, and he so wanted it to be real.
Yeah. Oh, it's a cool story.
Wanted it to be real. It's a cool story. He was like, and this was the first time he ever had 23 witnesses to an abduction. I mean, most of the time it's just one person, right? And then you see them in their hypnosis, and they're like, "Oh God, he's coming for me again. Oh, he's putting it right." So it's like, what?
Well, right? Do you know though how all the witnesses came together? I mean, how do they get aggregated?
Okay, so that's where the problem starts.
Okay,
he never met any of these witnesses. There were several times he tried to call the witness, and they'd be like, "Oh, she's in the shower," and he's like, "Well, can I call back in 30 minutes?" And they'd be like, sure, call back in 30 minutes. And then he
calls and letters and things like that, right?
Just calls. Yeah. And then random letters that he was getting. One was from a New York Post delivery driver said that he saw the whole thing. He saw a woman floating in the sky and then saw her get taken up into a red hole that was in these clouds, right? So,
but that was from that delivery driver. How did he get his he called and left a message, or
he called
sent
and left
letter?
a message. Yeah, he called and left a message. So a lot of these were just messages, and so
well, you're
no
talking
real
89, 89.
Talking 89, right? So there was answering machines, right?
Yeah,
There was
cell phone
beepers. There was
beepers.
there were cell phones, but you'd have to be super wealthy to
right.
own one. Right.
They were pretty big too. They were like this.
Right. So one of the articles that I found was interesting. It said these two guys, they are parapsychologist George P. Hansen, together with Joseph J. Stefula and Richard D. Butler. They were critical of Hopkins for not verifying the close relationship between the housewife, right, and the witnesses. He didn't verify whether she knew them. She says she didn't know them, and they also said that they didn't know her either, right? So the independence of the supposed 23 witnesses to the phenomenon, right? Among the testimonies that Hopkins had accepted as valid was that of a woman who said she had not been able to see clearly because of the fog. On the morning in which the weather conditions, there was no fog. And then another lady was excusing herself because she said she would always leave her curtains open at night for fear of closing them. So these don't sound like people that are like together. I mean, I lived in the city. There's 2 million people on top of each other,
right?
A lot of crazies. This just doesn't make sense.
Was there any information that you found that they went back and looked at other of Budd Hopkins investigations on other UFO experiences? Was he like this? Did he not vet?
No, according to Carol and Peter Robbins, he became obsessed with Linda's story. Like, he said, this is it. We've got it. Right.
Maybe he had a thing for Linda. Was she attractive?
She was attractive then. Well, she's 77 now, so it's okay. But yeah, she was an attractive woman, but she played this like well. So this is where it gets crazy, is that even after the whole thing happened, right? They went on talk show circuits. I mean, she was getting a lot of press. She was on Oprah. She was on Ricky Lake.
She was going with Budd on this tour, right?
Yes.
With Budd. Yeah. Was
So
Carol there with them on these?
Yeah. The other thing Carol said too, that the story kept elaborating, like kept adding on. And it felt like, to me, with everything that I've read and watching it, it was like the story kind of just died down a little bit. And when it died down, that's when Richard and Dan, the two officials,
came out. So they were bringing witnesses out and
right.
Different
that was 1991. This happened in 89, and then in 91, oh my God, here's Richard and Dan.
It's such a bold sort of elaborate scheme to come up with witnesses that are two guys that are personal protection for a UN Secretary General. So, like, to be very specific about that, you know what I mean, is that to me is odd. How did that come about?
Okay, so these two guys came to her house, she said, came to Linda's apartment. Apparently her husband was never home.
She wasn't even sleeping with him.
No, the night that she was taken out the window.
Yeah.
He wasn't there. He wasn't in that room with her, so he didn't witness anything, right?
And she had kids too, right? So no one.
She had two sons. The one son is not talking. The other son, Johnny, doesn't really want to talk about it, but he did. She gets abducted, right? So anyway, Richard and Dan come to their apartment, knock on the door.
Yep.
She lets them in. They were like police officers, right? And they showed her badges. They came into the apartment and they were accosting her like, you need to stop talking about this. You need to stop telling people about what you saw.
Why would they go there? Because she wasn't mentioning this UN General Secretary yet, right?
No, they didn't want her talking about the abduction anymore.
Yeah,
that's what she said.
Why did they call attention to it? By letting her know that they had they had something to do with something.
Well,
but why would they do that?
We saw it. We saw it too. So why would that matter?
But why would why would they go tell her that and then tell her to stop talking about it? I don't understand the sequence of events here, because my point here is, why did Perez de Cuellar come into play at all?
Because of Richard and Dan.
Yeah,
they said that they ran security for him. So that's what doesn't make any sense in this whole thing. Is like, She's never come out to say, "Oh, while I was floating, I looked down and I saw a car
That's what I mean. If
underneath the FDR."
yeah,
She never
yeah.
said that.
But,
So
but if
why would
Rich,
these guys even care?
that's what I mean. Why would Richard and Dan go to her apartment, and how would they know which apartment to go to, and how would they know it's her? How would they know? Why would they go there and call attention to them being a part of this whole encounter? You know what I mean? Why would that be the case? That dragged this, De Colar into it. Did she know?
She started telling Budd that she thought she was being followed, and she felt like people were watching her, is what she said.
Right, but do you see my point? Like, if she were to make this story up, she's going to come up with these guys, these two dudes, and she's going to name them Rich and Dan, and then she's going to go, okay, let me make it even better. Why don't I attach them as security guards to this U.S. Secretary General? You know what I mean? Let's do that and make it really credible. But like, how would she know to do that? Is my point. Like, I don't understand how that fabrication came.
Budd Hopkins went looking for Richard and Dan. He went to every police station in New York City. He did research about Javier Colar, trying to find out who his security was. Couldn't find anything. I don't know why she would make this up.
I understand all that. I'm just wondering, let's just put it in Richard and Dan's hands right now. Let's just say it's true. Let's just say they witnessed it. They were there. Let's say they were under the bridge. They're down there. They're legit. Why would they go to her and tell her to stop talking about it? She didn't know Javier Perez de Colar from Adam. She didn't even know he was in part of the picture of this story.
But
why would they go to her? That's my question.
If you're selling government cover-up, sure, you'd make it up. None of it makes sense. But, dude, it adds to a great story.
It really does, but there's two sides to this lie. If she concocted that whole thing happening, she had to have known the inner workings and know this guy, De Colar, just to make it up in order to attach it. She thought that would be really romance this. It would really bring a drama to it, this story, right? On the other side, why would they call attention to themselves by going to this?
Why would the FBI be bugging her?
She didn't know about them.
Why would the FBI be bugging her apartment?
You're talking 89, right? So in 89, people were, it's a big deal, right? The government, UFOs and aliens.
She went as far as telling Budd that, she thought she was being followed. She thought her apartment was bugged. So he had a guy that was a bug expert go to her apartment and scan it, and even scan his apartment, because she convinced him that he was being bugged too.
Maybe they had a little love affair going on.
They might have. Here's the other thing too. If they were in a car underneath the FDR, first of all, what were they doing under there? Why were two security guards and the secretary of the UN underneath the FDR? What were they doing?
Well, let's back up, because Perez.
Have you ever been under the FDR?
I have, yeah.
You can't see anything.
I hung out there a lot.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Javier Perez de Colar, he's denied all of this, right? So
a letter was sent to Budd from Javier saying that he saw it. Okay. The letters from Richard and Dan and the letters from all of the other people that wrote in.
Wait, the letter is from Richard and Dan. It's not from Colar.
No, there was a letter from Colar that was signed by Javier Colar.
Had the emblem seal on it as a UN Secretary General?
They didn't say that. It just came in an envelope, right? Everything was typed or handwritten. Most of them were typed, but
newspaper
signed.
Cutout words.
If you saw me under the bridge.
I just don't. So here's the thing.
No, wait.
I'm still hyper focused on this. The Richard Dan Colar combination. If that was a lie, my point is, if she made that up, it's fantastical. Like, why would that? How would you bring that into it? Like, what are you thinking? That's why I lean towards almost, and I'm not weighing in my decision yet, but I lean towards how do you make that up? You can't make that up. You can't make that up. Why would you make that up?
FBI agents came to my apartment and they don't want me to stop talking about the alien abduction. Their names were frickin' Frack. Come on.
No, I know, but you're missing my point. My point is,
like, why do that? Why pick this specific person? Have you ever heard
of Perez de Colar?
Well, when I was living in New York City, I would hear about the Secretary of the UN all the time.
Yeah, but how could you make that bold statement and a lie to say that he was under the bridge? And I know that they told me. You know what I mean? How would you know where the fuck he would be? Because he probably has an
Well,
itinerary. He's a
the
busy
other,
guy.
you know, Linda didn't remember this too. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. Linda did not reach out to Budd right away. Quite a bit of time that went by, enough time for her to read his books and to get an understanding of who he was. I had mentioned those guys earlier, right? Hansen and Hopkins and Stefano, right?
Yep.
Richard Butler, Joseph Stefano, and George Hansen, right? Well, when they dug into this themselves, they found as many as 16 parallels between Linda's story and the Garfield Reeves Stevens 1989 science fiction novel Night Eyes.
Really?
Linda also, here's another little tidbit for Linda. She also said that she could see the paranormal. She said her grandmother was gifted with the same thing, so she would see spirits and ghosts. But later she found out that those spirits and ghosts were not spirits and ghosts, they were aliens. Not only did Richard and Dan come to her apartment, right, and threaten her basically, they also abducted her.
Shit, this is her report.
This is her report. She said that she was wired, and then all of a sudden she's like, no, stop. Get the hell away from me. She's in the car, and you hear them
she has that recorded.
Hey. Yeah, she has it recorded. They're like, hey, you better keep your mouth shut, half-breed. They were calling her half-breed. They were telling her that she was half alien, half human.
Was that in the Garfield Night Eyes book?
Yeah. The other thing, too, that Budd felt, and this is across, before Linda and everything, he felt that the aliens were out to do no good. They were out to harm us, and that's why they were taking eggs from people, and they were trying to create a hybrid. That's what Budd believed. Yeah.
I think Budd went down a rabbit hole. I think Budd was probably so taken by all of these interviews and stories with other people and encounters that you get locked up into it.
Well, this was interesting too. For the recordings when she was abducted, that she had herself recorded on the abductions, right? She said, that's not evidence. That's proof that they came after me. Now, after the whole Richard Dan thing, this is my favorite line of all.
The Richard Dan thing when they took her?
When they took her, right? And they're calling her half-breed, and they're telling her to keep her mouth shut and stop talking about the abduction and all this stuff, right? Budd received a letter from Richard and Dan, and the letter ended with, "We'll keep in touch. Thanks, Richard and Dan."
I think if you were conspiring, if you're making this up, if Linda's making this up and she's she is the author of these letters, you wouldn't sign it Richard and Dan. I think you'd put something else. You'd write, if it was a true story.
Now,
if these guys really existed, they wouldn't put Richard and Dan.
Carol took the letters, right, that were all signed, even the one from Javier Collar, to a handwriting specialist. And the handwriting specialist took the samples of all the signatures, saw the way they made the letter H, saw the way they made the letter J, compared them all, and they were all written by the same person. She didn't say it was Linda, but she said they were all signed by the same person because they were too perfect. They were too exact. Nobody signs their signature the same way twice.
What if Budd's in on it? Maybe Budd was the co-conspirator.
That was the other thing, and that's why Carol wanted to dig in on this. She's like, this can't be my husband. He can't be. He's been doing this his whole life. Why all of a sudden would he be doing this? It could be they had some sort of romantic thing. Maybe he was infatuated with her. Her husband didn't go on tour with her either.
Yeah, right. Where's he? So none of the witnesses were disclosed, right? They were none of them.
No.
None of them. You never saw one.
No,
you only heard.
You only heard.
Yeah.
Budd never personally met any of these people. He either spoke to them on the phone, received a tape recording, or got a letter. Now, the kid. Because after all this went down, Linda then went back to Budd and said, they came after my family. They took my boy.
Who said this? Who said
Linda.
this?
Linda said this.
Okay.
She took pictures, Polaroid pictures of them with nosebleeds. They all had nosebleeds, right?
What?
Yeah. Yeah, because remember, she said that they had stuck a thing up in her nose and they implanted that thing.
Wait, she's saying the aliens came after her kids?
Yeah. Yeah. And then Budd was like, yeah, this is a common thing because they're interested in bloodlines. This story gets crazier and crazier. And that's what Carol's problem was. She went back and reviewed all the videotapes of all the people that he had hypnotized before. And she compared the way that Linda was hypnotized and the way that all the other people were hypnotized. And she's like, She wasn't hypnotized.
Is there any more compelling info we need to talk about? Because I want to dive into this. I think
Well, here's the thing too, is that her son, Johnny, who actually appears on the documentary for like 2 minutes,
yeah.
right?
How
He
old is
said
he
that
now?
he's in his
40.
30s, I think,
Yeah,
30s or
30.
40s.
Yeah,
He lives
yeah.
in Manhattan still. He wanted to remain anonymous. He's like, please make sure that my face is not on the thing. And I'm like, dude, they know your name. They know your name is
Right.
Johnny.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So
Napolitano.
he said that when he was 6 years old, this is prior to the alien probing up his nose. He said when he was 6 years old, he had a horrible nightmare.
Wait, that's how old he was when the aliens came?
No,
6?
he was like 12. He was 12 when the aliens came.
Okay.
But this is when he was 6. And this is going to lead into where I'm going next with this. He was 6 years old. He had a nightmare. And he went and told his mom about the nightmare. And she said, it probably wasn't a nightmare, baby. It was real. So now he started thinking that every time he had a freaking nightmare, that it wasn't just a dream. It was real.
So wait, this is his firsthand account? He's telling that story? Okay.
Yeah. Johnny believes she couldn't have made this up, being abducted. He believes that.
He's the youngest of her kids?
He's the oldest.
Oh, he's the
youngest is
oldest.
not. Yeah, he's the oldest kid. The other kid was younger. When they listened to the recording of him, because after he got abducted, Budd talked to Johnny on the phone, right? And he's like, yeah, they were here and they took me.
Yeah, she's telling him what to say. Yeah.
Yeah. The story sounded made up.
And Budd's recording all this.
Budd's recording it over the phone. And then Linda went down to Budd's the next, either later that night or the next day, and underwent hypnosis to talk about what she experienced. That 3 Greys were in her apartment. They took her son. There was nothing she could do. She was frozen in fear. And she just kept thinking, my son hates me because he doesn't think I'm fighting for him. Dude, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay.
Also, the book Witnessed, the book that Budd wrote, half of it is made up of copies of these letters from Richard and Dan. Apparently, Richard and Dan were just great writers because they wrote him all the time. Here's another thing. When Linda was abducted by Richard and Dan, when they took her in the car, she had a gun on her. She said she borrowed a gun from a friend and she kept it in her purse. And they took her and she threatened them with the gun and they let her out.
These personal protection guys who watch over the UN General Secretary, they don't have weapons.
Right. And they couldn't fight her back. Come on.
Right.
It just, dude, it doesn't make any sense to me. None of it makes sense to me.
Are you ready to weigh in? Because I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Why don't you? Do you think this is a mostly true alien story or not?
Absolutely not. I think this
still after we revisited this,
even after we revisited and the new stuff that I found, especially this is compelling against the book, dude. I mean, this just makes me think that Budd Hopkins was in on this as well, or maybe he got so caught up in it because he got so caught up in this and wanting it to be true so badly, he overlooked a lot of the facts. He got hung up in the story and he overlooked the facts. The facts tell you, why would these guys randomly come to her house if they were hiding under the bridge doing whatever, blow or whatever they were doing underneath the 3-way or whatever they were having underneath the FDR? Who cares? Nobody saw them. So why all of a sudden would they appear at Linda's apartment? Why are the handwriting experts saying this is written by the same person? And why was not one witness interviewed in person by Budd Hopkins?
Okay, so you're saying it's not a mostly true alien story.
And how did she float through the door, through the glass?
Well, aliens can get you through. They can get you
she
through
vibrated at such a high speed, like the Flash.
Listen, I'm not questioning how the aliens got them through the window. That's not my question. Aliens can do whatever aliens are off the hook here. They can do anything. Aliens.
Okay.
In my opinion. All right. So we can't question that because they're just so advanced. They're able to get you through windows and float you to their ships. They can dance, they can sing, they can float you. They can do it all. All right. So you're saying it's not a mostly true alien story.
No.
Let me weigh in now. I remember when we first visited this, I believe that this was a mostly true story. But as we're revisiting this, the one thing that troubles me or makes me still lean towards this as a mostly true alien story, and that's not my final decision, is the whole Dan and Richard and Dan and Kular under the bridge. That to me is such a fantastical story that how do you make that up? And why would you drag these characters into it? So that's the one aspect to this where I'm stuck a little bit. Now, the fact that Carol Rainey, Budd Hopkins' wife, turned on him leads me to believe that I think Budd was infatuated with Linda.
Oh yeah, he was. He became obsessed with the case.
Yeah, but I think more than that. I think the two of them were having. I think they had a love affair, and I think that's never come out. I think that was this was a sexual relationship. I think they did go into cahoots. I think that the two of them worked together to really make this story something. Budd kept it from Carol because he was in love with Linda. I'm not going to give Budd the benefit of the doubt. The fact that 23 witnesses and he didn't meet one of them. He only got letters and phone calls. Budd was in on this. This was not a mostly true alien story. And I'm really disappointed in this because I think Budd worked his whole life to build up credibility, and then he gets caught up in his infatuation with Linda Napolitano. This is a story of money and sex and aliens, bro. This is exactly what this is.
Is that abduction seduction?
It's abduction seduction right here. We witnessed it firsthand. This is not true. This is not a mostly true alien story. I'm kind of pissed off by it too.
Right. I think you're right because I think Carol found out and she's just not going to say that because she doesn't want to admit that her husband banged this housewife from Brooklyn.
Bud's not a dumb guy. Bud's a smart guy.
No,
Bud got to where
dude.
Budd is but he got caught up in this love, sex, and alien and money story. All right, that's the full case on the Linda Napolitano, the abduction, the X-ray, the alleged UN witness, and a docuseries that stirred it all back up decades later. Andrew says it's not a mostly true alien story. I agree with him. This was aliens, sex, and money. This is what this was all about. And I hate to say that. It kind of pisses me off. It's a cool story. Are you processing this okay, Andrew? You good?
Yeah,
you all right?
I am. I'm in shock. Would you say it to Linda? If Linda was on the show, would you say it's all made up?
I would call her out. Yeah, I mean, listen, listeners, you heard it here first. This is what happened. This was a love affair. And they were in on it in cahoots. I mean, the Bud's not a dumb guy. You got to vet your witnesses. If they weren't coming forward, you didn't meet anybody, didn't talk to anybody, it's obvious, Bud. We know what was going on. Andrew and I have weighed in, and as always, we're leaving some space for mystery. We want you guys to now weigh in. Was this a mostly true alien story? Do you agree with my assessment of this being a love affair? Or is it a modern myth wrapped in lights, lawsuits, and a window that maybe never opened? All right, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, come on and follow, subscribe, and share this show with someone who loves a good story that doesn't have easy answers. And don't forget to check out our alien news and entertainment episodes. Those drop every Friday at 10 a.m. and cover the latest sightings, science, and unexplained events across the galaxy in under 8 minutes. Thanks for being here. We'll be back next week with another case that tests what we think we know. Until then, be kind to the aliens when they get here. Andrew, say goodbye to the aliens.
Bye, aliens.
They're coming.
UFO sightings. Many Americans have wondered about